Hi, remember my second channel? I'm currently uploading there a lot more frequently now, so if you are interested, consider subscribing. Link is always in the description. I greatly appreciate it. So in my previous video, a lot of you wanted me to make some sort of manga guide, and I thought that's a brilliant idea. Why didn't I think of that? And then I remembered there is an endless supply of manga on varying difficulties to actually find and read, as well as an endless supply of differing categories that spiral into completely different subsections. A complete, full manga guide sounded a little bit difficult, but I still managed to create some sort of variation of one, which I feel like may actually help. It's not going to be the best one to ever exist, I admit, but hopefully accessibility wise, a lot of these series should be pretty easy to find and not the most obscure thing to exist, and most importantly, enjoyable. That's all that matters, right? To provide a bit of guidance, to provide a bit of enjoyment. So I have a bunch of different categories that I've kind of merged together to make it a little bit easier, and to start everything off, we're going to start with starters, good introduction series. And the three that I'm going to go with, because I feel like they're rather fitting: Naruto, Bleach, and One Piece. The reason I put these series here is for me they are extremely well rounded. If you're just starting to get into the industry, if you're just starting to read manga, these three series will provide you with pretty much everything. A complete story with a beautiful cast of characters, with a good portrayal of themes, and a variety of differing emotions that you can wholeheartedly indulge within. They also have quite a bit of length to them, and while this might turn off a lot of people, the way I think about it, if you're able to at least read one of these stories, you will most likely never have to touch a story as long as this for quite some time. The way these stories are written is extremely outdated. No one's trying to write 15 years worth of material anymore, so it's somewhat rare that you get extremely long running stories like this. Not to mention, just to put the cherry on top, this is the prime era of manga, the golden age, the big three. This is what popularized and made manga successful over 20 years ago. I would say these three stories are a great experience, and albeit a hefty way to kickstart your manga journey. Moving on, we have compelling slash action: Hunter x Hunter, Jujutsu Kaisen, Kaiju Number 8, and Attack on Titan. There's a lot of variety in these series, a lot of beautiful themes that get played upon very heavily, obviously dives into that compelling nature, but their action also backs up a lot of it. Some of them dive in a lot more than others, but I think you will find some very beautiful stories being woven here, some very beautiful characters, and stuff that you can wholeheartedly love and appreciate, and potentially even become some of your favorites. Next up, we have chaotic. These are stories that aren't necessarily all too there. They're not bad, but they're very quick, they're very all over the place. They basically embody that term of being chaos itself. And stories that wield chaos not only are very difficult to write, but sometimes difficult to enjoy. But if you enjoy a unique storytelling experience, you enjoy very quirky and all over the place humor and action and writing in itself with finesse, these three works will be entirely up your alley. Chainsaw Man, Den, and Fire Punch. They all have their own differing identity when it comes to chaos, different levels, different extremities. Den's probably the most unique in the sense of how much weirdness that it brings into it, but when it comes to the more symbolic nature of the storytelling experience, when it comes to the emotion, when it comes to the severity of a lot of things, Chainsaw Man and Fire Punch is going to hit all those marks for you, while providing a very all over the place but compelling experience that is natural and controlled. This category is very unique, you don't see it all too often. I'd highly recommend all of them. Moving on, we have romance slash lifestyle slash fun. I don't know why I merged all these together, but I thought it was rather fitting. There's a handful of differing series here, so bear with me. First and foremost, an author I wholeheartedly enjoy, Kuji Seo, someone that I absolutely adore for the romance genre and have read basically all of their works. But the ones I'm going to recommend for you: Suzuka, Kimi no Uramachi, and Fuka. The funniest thing about these three works by Seo Kuji is that they're all interwoven. They're part of the same universe. So while they aren't necessarily sequels to one another, they take place around some of the same characters and within the same timeline, so to speak. These stories are rather grounded for the most part. They play on more so realism than a lot of the tropey nature that romance usually falls into, and it's kind of why it had that alluring nature to itself. I really enjoy all the works by Seo Kuji, and these three stories I absolutely love. Another author that just has quality romance writing through and through is Ayo Sakisaka, and these two stories are Haru Ride and Love Me Not. I couldn't recommend these two more than enough if you're big into romance, if you're big into that school crush relationship and trying to find one's identity, but also trying to find how they feel about certain people and about themselves and what they deserve, and coming to learn to love, I think is is a good way to put it. These will be great stories for you. Simple in scope, but very emotional, very impactful, and just a great experience. Now I throw in these two because they have romance elements, but they're more so lifestyle and fun. Kaguya-sama and Oshinoko. They're actually done by the same author, just with a different artist on Oshinoko. These are incredibly fun stories that channel a high volume of very powerful emotions. They feel scarily authentic at times. Even though they usually play on a lot of tropes, there is so much severity that goes into these emotions, into these moments, that make them feel so incredibly relatable and grounded. It's not the normal romance stories, but it's elements of it within it, mixing them with a great cast of characters that will pull you in a lot of different directions and just has such finesse on its writing. The last two series within this category, Spy X Family and Nisekoi. Spy X Family I couldn't recommend more than enough. I absolutely love this story. I've been reading it since day one, and I think it's for everyone. It does have some very serious undertones that obviously do get played upon in terms of its political nature and war brewing and two nations on the brink of collapse, or colliding at least. But on top of the dark elements, it has a beautiful family building type of story that is very unique. It has a beautiful dynamic. It's something that you can fall in love with very quickly. Nisekoi plays into a familiar trope of being a harem, but still rather enjoyable. It's got a bit of length to it, and there's a lot of enjoyable characters within it, which I think provides a very interesting story. Nothing all too crazy or all too impressive compared to the others, but something nice and simple. Moving on to the depressing and or disturbing category. Self-explanatory, of course. First and foremost, we have Oyasumi Punpun, all-time classic for myself. I think this is a must-read for people that are very into depressing or disturbing stories. This, for me personally, is probably the pinnacle of what you'll get. Don't get me wrong, a lot of stories do justice to mental health, to very serious topics, but Ino Asano with Punpun feels way too real. It is very scary, it is very heavy, and you should most definitely mentally prepare yourself to feel a lot of emotions. Obviously, take all of these series with a set of caution. Be careful going into them. They can trigger a lot of things, that's for sure. Flowers of Evil, similar position, very beautiful, very powerful, very emotional. Also, scarily authentic. A Trail of Blood or Blood on the Tracks is a story like no other. I don't want to explain it, I don't want to give you details, just know that it is the most unique and or messed up kind of situation that just goes on between a mother and her son. Now, if you're probably thinking the worst of the worst in that situation or that sentence I just said, it is not that. But it will definitely take you on some sort of journey, and the artwork that complements it is insane. It is an unbelievable read, and I highly recommend people check it out. And just to end off on a well-rounded depressing note, A Silent Voice. This story about a bully and a deaf woman coming to find themselves, find their own identity, but also get closer to one another is very heartwarming. It's very sincere. It's very real. It's an incredible experience, and I'm sure a lot of you probably have seen the movie for it, but the manga is beautiful nonetheless. Our next category is sad. Stories that really want to hurt you, really want to break your heart. And while a lot of the depressing and disturbing series could also be in here, these ones, for me personally, are fully created or articulated to make you feel pain, to try and make you cry. Your Lie in April, have to throw that in there. Orange, also have to throw that in there. And my personal favorite, To Your Eternity. All of these will have a very similar method in hurting you in the worst way possible, pulling out so much emotional connection to characters only to potentially kill them off, but in a very surreal and unforgivable sometimes type of way. If you go into any of these stories, prepare yourself mentally, emotionally, maybe get yourself some tissues because you most likely will be crying. This next category I somewhat struggled with because I didn't really know how to merge all of these together, but we have horror, psychological, and brutal. They kind of go hand in hand. But first and foremost, Tokyo Ghoul. Obviously, a lot of you know how I feel about Tokyo Ghoul and what it's done for myself and how it's kind of changed my life in a lot of different ways, so I couldn't recommend this more than enough. It is all of these things. Next, we have Parasite, kind of the original Tokyo Ghoul, so to speak, and it was one of the first manga that I ever read. I believe it was the first mature or seinen story that I ever read for manga. We also have Happiness, 20th Century Boy, and Villain Saga. Do you see the range I'm going for here? These are all brutal, surreal experiences that have so much detail and emphasis towards them. The characters, their mentalities, their emotions, their thoughts, and how it's all ripped apart and thrown all over the place. Very brutal, a lot of horror elements, inherently psychological. And then the last three I want to add in here, Gantz, Hell's Paradise, and Maiden Abyss. There is a lot of variety in this category, especially Made in Abyss. This might look cutesy. You might think this is a joke that I put this in here, but trust me, as beautiful as a fantasy story and an exploration story it is, it will hurt you. It will completely rip out your soul. Prepare yourself, because it's deceiving. Now, I was going to put in some sort of comedy section here, but to be entirely honest, I'm not really a comedy person. I think there's a lot of humor in the other stories that I've mentioned, lifestyle ones, but when it comes to straight comedy or stories created with the purpose of only being funny, I don't necessarily read all that much, so I couldn't really provide some sort of category. My apologies. The last category that I want to put is classics, or series that I believe are timeless. This is constantly changing, constantly fluctuating. There's so many series that you can add, take out, and just play around with in its entirety. But to start off, to pay respect and homage to it, Dragon Ball. This is early manga. This is from many years ago, prior to all of these series that I've mentioned. A lot of them pay homage to Dragon Ball. So if you ever wanted to slightly see what popular manga was back before everything that we have nowadays, and where a lot of the originality actually came from in certain aspects, certain tropes, certain character archetypes, certain portrayal of themes, or even a formula, so to speak, Dragon Ball's a great place to go. It's timeless. Next up, we have Berserk. For me, this will always and forever be a classic, a timeless piece of literature that sadly and unfortunately was cut short. Not the story, but the author himself, Kentaro Miura, who only a year ago sadly passed away. It was just recently his anniversary. I think when people are ready to take on Berserk, to look at Miura's legacy, the iconic story that he created, it is undoubtedly a must-read and a timeless piece of work. Now, I have to put Monster in here. For me, this is masterclass writing. This is an experience like no other, and it will most likely create one of the most iconic villains for yourself. Someone that is so fearsome, so intoxicating, so grueling, so memorable. The story is beautiful from start to finish and very impactful. Now, this next story is pure personal bias, but one of my favorite stories of all time that isn't actually a manga, but a manhwa, The Horizon. A very short story, only 20 chapters, but whenever I get the chance, I will forever push this story. To put incredibly simply, it follows two children in the aftermath of war, and you get to see the full frontal severity of that war, the death that surrounds them, the broken environment and people within it that don't know where to go, that don't know what to do, that are just trying to survive. It turns human nature in on itself and shows the brutality of it, the survival nature, the monstrous and sick nature, through the eyes of very young children. Not a lot of stories would be able to do what this story does. It is extremely difficult. That's why I have a lot of respect for it, because it's almost poetic. It is beyond traumatizing, but beautiful, and I will always recommend it. The last three that I want to throw in here are also classics in their own right. Akira, pretty self-explanatory, similar to Dragon Ball. It's very old school, very artsy, very revolutionary, and changed a lot of things. There's also a movie for this, you'll probably enjoy it. Secondly, Nana. I think for this time period and the story that it's trying to tell, very beautiful. A very loving friend got me onto this story, and I couldn't thank them enough for it. Looking back in hindsight, even though it's not finished, this story has done a lot for people, and it feels eerily authentic. And to end it off on a very artistic note, Vagabond. This too is not finished. It is a manga depiction of a samurai tale, I believe, but it is incredibly conceptualized. Story being told, the artwork being drawn, everything is beautiful and gorgeous and stunning from start to finish. If you ever wanted to experience a story that has so much emphasis on its artistic flair, how it portrays its character in a certain light, how it explores and extrapolates different themes and showcases that artistically, this story is 100% for you. And that, all of you lovely people, is the end of my somewhat manga guide. Hopefully it's able to help in some sort of fashion. Hopefully it gives you some sort of stories to read. I didn't want to send you across the internet looking for obscure series, but I think there's enough variety in here to at least give people some sort of direction. At the end of the day, it's entirely up to you on what story you read next, and I wish you all the best for your journey. Hopefully some of these series can help. Endtime. So with that, welcome to the end of the video. If you have made it this far, thank you. I appreciate you. I would love to know how your manga journey has gone so far. Are you just starting? Are you fully deep within it? Or maybe you're kind of bored of it. Maybe you're burnt out. Maybe you've been reading for 10, 15 odd years. I don't know. Let me know in the comment section below. But with that, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Drink plenty of water, and I will see you within the next one. Goodbye.